Welcome to Magnificat TV News, dedicated to offering news of the Church. It is Wednesday, February 16, 2022. The Pope once again rejected the use of euthanasia and assisted suicide in his message at Wednesday General Audience. Benedict XVI has rejected accusations of protecting pedophile priests and expressed his sorrow at being treated as a liar. Cardinal Duca, Archbishop of Prague, has accused Cardinal Marx of Munich of allowing Pope Benedict to be insulting. An Anglican bishop, the fourth in a few months, has joined the Catholic Church in protest against the growing liberalism in his church. Approval of homosexuality divides Calvinists in the United States, and one group has split from the main branch. In the catechesis at Wednesday General Audience, Pope Francis has applauded palliative care and said that euthanasia and suicide are unacceptable.
In Wednesday's General Audience catechesis, Pope Francis continued to elaborate on the figure of Saint Joseph, focusing today on the special devotion Christian people have always had for him as patron of happy death. We cannot avoid death, the Pope said, and precisely for this reason, after having done all that is humanly possible to take care for the sick, it is immoral to commit therapeutic cruelty. The second consideration has to do with the quality of death itself, of pain, of suffering. We must be grateful for all the help that medicine is striving to give, to be through the so-called palliative care. But we must be attentive, he continued, not to focus this help with unacceptable drifts that lead to euthanasia. We must accompany death, but not provoke death or assisted suicide. Francis insists that one must always privilege the right to care for all, so that the weakest, in particular the elderly and the sick, are never discarded. Life is a right, not death, which must be welcomed, not supplied. And this ethical principle concerns everyone, not just Christians or believers.
In a letter, Benedict XVI rejected accusations that he had protected a pedophile priest and regretted that he was accused of being a liar.
Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI has made public a letter in which he regrets that the oblivion of his participation in a meeting that took place 42 years ago was used to doubt his veracity and to call him a liar. Benedict XVI has shown his pain for being treated as a liar, for having made a mistake, which he has recognized and for which he has apologized. About his participation in a meeting that took place on January 15, 1980, to deal with the case of a priest who committed abuse. At the meeting, however, it was only decided to admit the pedophile priest to the diocese for treatment and not to allow him to exercise the priesthood. It was only later, when Ratzinger was no longer Archbishop of Munich, that he was allowed to return to the priesthood. The Pope Emeritus also asks forgiveness for all the crimes of pederasty committed by members of the Church during his term of office, even if he had no way of knowing about them and preventing them. In the letter, he is grateful for the expressions of support he has received. In these days, he says, I have experienced so much support, so much friendship, and so many signs of trust as I could not have imagined. I am especially grateful, Benedict XVI continued, to Pope Francis for the confidence, support, and prayers he has shown me personally.
The Archbishop of Prague, Cardinal Duka, has come to Benedict XVI's defense and accused Cardinal Marx of Munich of permitting that he be treated as a liar.
Since the attacks against Benedict XVI began after the publication of the report on the abuse of minors in the Archdiocese of Munich, few voices have been heard in defense of the Pope Emeritus. Therefore, it is worth noting the determined stance of the Archbishop of Prague and Primate of the Czech Republic, Cardinal Dominik Duka, who openly accuses Cardinal Marx of harming Benedict XVI. Duka is a cardinal of recognized stature both inside and outside the Church. Persecuted during communism, he was condemned and imprisoned for his pastoral activity. Cardinal Duka has decided to protest against the treatment of Benedict XVI by the Archdiocese of Munich by publishing a note on the website of the Archdiocese of Prague. The Czech primate publicly accused Munich Archbishop Marx, the local cura and the president of the German episcopate Batzing, of having defamed the elderly pontiff and tarnished his reputation. His note of protest against the attacks on Benedict XVI is significantly entitled Munich Betrays for the Second Time, thus comparing everything that is happening today in Munich with the infamous conference held in Munich in 1938, and which concluded with an agreement that led to the annexation by Nazi Germany of vast territories of Czechoslovakia. With great regret, he admits that the way in which the Archdiocese of Munich has used the report is, for him, one of the greatest disappointments he has experienced in the Church. He stresses that in the report, which probably had cost hundreds of thousands of euros, Benedict XVI was unjustly slandered and hurt.
Bishop Peter Foster, who is 71 and retired in 2019, is the fourth Anglican bishop to be received in the Catholic faith within a year, and the fifth in the last 2 years.
He is the second bishop from the evangelical wing of the Church of England to enter the Catholic Church, after Michael Nazir Ali, former bishop of Rochester, became a Catholic in September. Until now, most Anglicans who become Catholics generally come from the Anglo-Catholic wing of the Anglican Communion. Foster spent 22 years as Bishop of Chester and was the first bishop to appoint a woman as suffragan when he named Libby Lane as Bishop of Stockport. Like Nazir Ali, he has strongly supported traditional marriage and actively opposed attempts to redefine its meaning. In 2003, he was one of the Anglican bishops who wrote to Rowan Williams, the Archbishop of Canterbury, to complain about his plans to appoint an openly gay priest as bishop. Until recently, Foster wrote regularly for Church Times, the Anglican newspaper, and in one article criticized Laudato Si, Pope Francis's environmental care encyclical, as naive.
Dozens of congregations of the Reformed Church in America, the Calvinists, have left the Protestant denomination by rejecting homosexuality.
Last New Year's Day, 43 Reformed Church in America congregations split from the national denomination over theological differences on same-sex marriage and the ordination of LGBTQ clergy. The departure of the conservative congregations to the new group, the Alliance of Reformed Churches, puts the economic survival of the parent church at serious risk. Before the split, the denomination had fewer than 200,000 members and 1,000 churches. Other conservative-leaning churches in the RCA, as well as those in the Presbyterian Church of Canada, the Christian Reformed Church of North America, and the Presbyterian Church in America, are also discerning whether to join the alliance. The launch of the alliance is part of a larger realignment within North American Protestantism. Over the past 2 decades, Episcopalians, Presbyterians, and Conservative Lutherans have formed their own denominations regarding LGBTQ inclusion and sexuality, and Methodists plan to split in the fall.
Our editorial this week is dedicated to commenting on Benedict XVI's letter in which he regrets having been accused of being a liar.
Sudden saint. Saint immediately. This was the cry that came from the throats and hearts of millions of Catholics as soon as St. John Paul II died. People had already canonized him, although the official canonization came a few years later. I was reminded of this expression when I read the letter of defense published this week by Benedict XVI against the accusations made against him. Accusations by a Munich law firm paid by the Munich diocese. Unfounded accusations, accusing him of having allowed a pedophile priest to settle in the Diocese of Munich when he was archbishop there and to exercise as a priest committing new abuses. However, his accusers know perfectly well that this is a lie. Long before the accusations were made, Benedict XVI had already said, as Peter Seewald says in his biography about him, that he had indeed participated in a meeting where the priest who came from another diocese was allowed to enter at the request of the bishop of that other diocese, but to receive therapy in the Diocese of Munich, which had an institute specialized in that. And that priest was forbidden in that meeting in which then Cardinal Ratzinger was indeed present. He was forbidden to have contact with minors and to exercise public worship. This is perfectly known to the accusers. I repeat, Benedict himself told his biographer. And the accusers know perfectly well that the meeting where it was decided that this pederast priest could return to practice took place when already Benedict XVI, when Cardinal Ratzinger was no longer Archbishop of Munich, but had been appointed by John Paul II prefect of the doctrine of the faith. He was no longer at the head of the diocese, and in that meeting he did not participate, as was natural. They know this perfectly well, but they don't care, because the objective is not to seek the truth. The objective is not to do justice to the victims. The objective is to erode the image of a man, of a holy and good man, who has raised with his doctrine, with his magisterium as a them against this wave of modernism and relativism that is flooding and sinking the ship of the church. The objective is to erode him as a person in order to discredit his work, his message. That is why this man should be considered a saint, because he's being persecuted precisely for his faith, and not a saint who falls into the chapter of confessors, those who with their lives demonstrate their love for Christ, but in the chapter of martyrs, because although he has not yet shed his blood, he is shedding his blood in a moral way, just as our Lord began to shed his blood already in the Garden of Olives, and he had not yet been crucified. His enemies know well what they are looking for, but nevertheless, they have not succeeded. They have not succeeded. It is true that the big media, including some of the Vatican, have titled the summary of the letter published by Benedict XVI, saying that the Pope asked forgiveness for the sexual abuses committed under his responsibility. It is true that Benedict XVI says this in his letter. It is a letter full of humility and sincerity. It is true that he says it, but in the same way that St. John Paul II asked forgiveness for the things that Catholics in general had done wrong as a member of the Church during the second millennium of the Christian era, just when we were beginning the third millennium, it is a sincere request for forgiveness. It is a generic request for forgiveness. To headline with that is already in the title to distort the news and manipulate the news, because what really matters, that for which this letter arises, is not if the Pope, when he governed, many things happened of which he didn't know, and that on the contrary he tried that they didn't happen. That is not what really matters. What is really important in this letter is that he says that in that meeting in which it was decided that this priest could celebrate again exercise as a priest, in that meeting he was not there, and that in the other one he was there, and it was not his responsibility, that those who have prepared his defense omitted something that he had already said previously, that he had been at the meeting in which the priest was allowed to enter the Munich diocese to receive therapy. That is to say, this holy and good man is being accused before the public opinion as a protector of pedophiles, and this is a lie. And in the letter he complains that this is a lie, and that is the essence of this letter, that this man shows his bleeding heart, because as he himself says, he's being branded as a liar, and that he is a liar is not true. That is precisely the lie. And the manipulation of the media consists precisely in making headlines as if he were recognizing that it is true that he lied, and that it is true that he protected this pedophile priest. However, they have not succeeded. In spite of everything, they have not succeeded. It is true that those who manage the New World Order are trying, but they have not achieved their goal. It is useless that, for example, when you look up for Benedict XVI, it doesn't appear Pope Emeritus, but ex-Pope. Now he's ex-pope, as if the Church had reduced him to the lay state as it did, among others, with McCarrick. To put Benedict XVI on the same level as McCarrick is a gross manipulation. I repeat, in spite of everything, they are not getting the results they are looking for. Now this situation also leaves some questions. Not only the realization that the New World Order is against him because it is necessary to erode his message by destroying his figure. I am left with a question: where are the bishops, the leaders of the Church, who have even received the episcopate from the hands of Benedict XVI himself and have sworn allegiance to him? Why so much silence? Only some have come out. We have come out to defend him. Very few. It is true, fortunately, some, as Cardinal Duca of Prague, for example, has publicly accused Cardinal Marx of defaming Benedict XVI or redefaming him. It is true that some of his friends have come out in his defense, but what has happened on the part of the majority is an absolute silence, some private letter, but no public manifestations, which is what should have happened. This shows the degree of fidelity to God and the capacity of friendship of those who have remained silent in this critical hour for this good man. But I insist, his enemies have not achieved what they were looking for. In the Catholics, I'm not referring to the baptized pagans. In Catholics, the prestige of Benedict XVI is even greater today than before. Just as they failed in trying to destroy Cardinal Pell, among others, they have failed in trying to destroy Benedict XVI. And if before we loved him very much and we were convinced that he was a saint in life, today we know that he is a saint by the life of a martyrdom, because we're seeing him suffer, attacked by some, and in the face of the indifference of others. And that is why I'm sure that on the day of his death, which he says in the letter that is already near, many of us will be many of us ordinary people, perhaps not the great ones, but many of us will cry out the same thing that happened when St. John Paul II died. Many of us will cry out, "Sodden saint!" Because justice must be done to this man. God will do it to him, and we must also do justice to him on earth. Sodden saint. Until next week, God willing.
If you would like to keep up to date with what is happening in the church, you can visit our news page, www.magnificat.tv. See you next week, God willing.